There were many incredible chess games played in 2022, but according to the Chess.com awards, this game right here is the best game of the year. This is Duda versus Anish Giri from November of last year, and it features a very important and instructive strategical decision in the beginning of the game and a beautiful tactical combination towards the end that made this game super rich, and it has a lot of really cool analysis that we're going to dive deep into. So the game began with the Nimzo-Rogozin structure. You put the bishop on b4, you expand with d5, and your intention is clear. You're developing your kingside pieces to very quickly and effectively castle your king into safety. Now in this position, there are many moves for white to consider. You can go bishop g5, you can go e3, you can go queen a4 check, you can throw in the move a3 just to question this bishop on b4. There are many ways to play, but perhaps the simplest and the one that Duda went for here is just to exchange in the center. Now typically after the move bishop g5, the position takes a far calmer approach now. There's no longer this tension in the center, so it becomes a more strategical game where both players are just trying to develop their pieces in the most effective manner. And this is sort of what we begin to see here with the move knight to d7. The knight is now heading eventually towards b6. From the b6 square, it of course makes contacts with c4. Along with a4, it defends the pawn on d5. Sometimes also this b7 square is a weakness in view of queen to b3, but now the knight will block the attack on that square. So the knight here is coming to b6, and now the move rook to c1, putting some pressure on c7, over-defending the knight, and generally improving the position. But in this situation, black decided he doesn't like this small strategical improvements. Anish Giri wanted to go for a more aggressive, more ambitious setup, a more risky one. It didn't work out here, but it's certainly an interesting idea. He went for h6 and then g5. Now, this is not novel territory. This has been tried before. It's a pretty common idea, but it does take you by surprise a little bit because typically this h6 idea in g5 is incredibly risky. So let's see how black decided to follow up with this. We have bishop g3 and knight to e4. Black is trying to improve the placement of the knight. Now notice that first of all there's immediate pressure on c3, and this is sort of the justification for bringing the rook to the c1. The knight is now very nicely defended, but additionally with the knight no longer on the f-file, sometimes this f5, f4 idea is not out of the question, definitely not. Additionally, the knight here is just very strong in general. I mean, it looks over the bishop, and it puts immediate pressure on the white pieces. We have queen to b3, further defending the knight, attacking the bishop, and also making contact with b7, and you can kind of see that being important here because eventually the bishop wants to develop, but then you lose b7. So this is where knight to b6 kind of comes into play. As I mentioned earlier, it's a very nice defensive piece, but also has some aggressive and ambitious intentions. And here, after the move e3, black played h5. Now, I should already note we are in new territory now. That happened with the move knight to b6. Previously, the move c6 has been tried, but knight to b6, this is now a fresh game. No master games have reached this position. So e3, h5, and we have c4. Now, this looks like a blunder, and if you have a keen eye, you will see that h5 simply traps the bishop, because after bishop e5, there is f6. But this is exactly what Duda was going for. He made the strategic decision here, and it's a highly intuitive one, to sacrifice the bishop. Now, in exchange, what are you getting? Well, let's take a look. After you take over here on d5, they take your bishop, you're going to give this check, the king moves, and now recapture the pawn. So you have 2 pawns for the bishop, so materially, you're not even that bad, right? It's only 1 point of material. But even more importantly, all of your pieces are involved, and this king, it's very unclear how or if it will ever become safe. The rook is in, the knight is in, already threatening knight g6 check. The queen has a very quick avenue. Additionally, through this check, it can definitely come in if the king ever steps onto light squares, and the bishop is also developed. So you can see that these mass of pieces that are surrounding the king over here give great compensation for the piece. Now, I do want to mention one more thing about the sacrifice. The engine, of course, will laugh at this move, and in fact, it will find a way to draw this position with the black pieces. But as a human, this is a very, very good practical decision to go for the sacrifice, because all of the moves for white basically play themselves. I mean, you're going to castle and go f4 to open up the rook and attack the king. You're already threatening knight g6. You have so many natural resources. Black is the one that needs to be so precise, and you can see that even at the top level, even Anish Giri cannot be that precise. And this is what you will very soon see. So king to g7, bishop d3, attacking the knight. And as I mentioned, castles going for f4, after which the rook will be a key attacker in the game as well. We have f4, and now rook to f8. And in this position, e4. And this is another important idea and another source of compensation from this sacrifice. There's this huge mass of pawns in the center. And this means that obviously in some endgame position, if you see yourself in an endgame against a bishop, these pawns are often going to be stronger than the piece. But even in a middle game, these pawns can be a huge issue for black to deal with. They restrict a lot of squares in the black side, and therefore black doesn't have as much space as they would want. Now, the game continued here with g3, and we had the move f5, continuing to push your pawns, already trying to perhaps push this to f6 with check. We had queen to g5, and rook takes c7. The point of queen to g5 is the following. Black realized that they need to get their pieces out. They had many pieces sleeping on the back rank, and so after queen g5, black is just starting to try to get some counterplay. There's some ideas maybe of attacking the king. The queen now can also swoop in to the d2 square or to the e3 with check. Black is trying their best shot to gain some level of counterplay. But after bishop b1, a very calm but effective move because it opens up white's control over e3. So now there are no checks. There is no counterattack. If you take, that does nothing because the simple king to h1, or as the engine bravely shows, king takes h2 will be completely fine for white. And essentially black has no level of counterplay whatsoever. So queen to d2, the point of which is to, again, tie down this queen. There's also the threat now of queen takes d4. And we had queen to f3, again, bravely defending this. Now, if you take this pawn, then the very simple king to h1, and if you take the knight, then after queen to g4, this is going to be game over. Check this out, check here, and queen h7 is mate. So seeing this checkmating idea, black decided it was necessary to give away the piece, and their hope was that after queen takes d4, you cannot take back here for the same mating idea, but after rook to c8, maybe, just maybe, black's pieces are getting out of their original squares, are starting to join in the attack, and maybe black can survive. But in this exact position, Duda took that idea, the idea that black can survive, and completely took it off the tables with an incredible sacrifice. In this position, and I urge you to pause the video, this is one of the most beautiful moves of the year. The move was rook g7 check, giving away the rook, and it's an incredible sacrificial idea, especially because there's not even a pawn on g7. So to look for a move like this takes an incredible awareness of the situation, but at the same time, it should make sense to you. We've castled, meaning we have the rook into the game. We have a rook on the 7th. We have this bishop opened up. We have a knight centralized, super strong, and a queen with access to the king side. This is one of those positions where you know that something has to give, and rook to g7 is that exact thing. Now, after king takes g7, we have f6 check, opening up this bishop, the point of which, of course, rook takes, then queen takes f6 will be game over. And so king to h6 was tried, but now knight to g4, and check this out, ladies and gentlemen. After king to g5, the incredible double sacrifice after sacrificing the rook, queen to f5 check, giving away your queen. Now after takes, rook takes f5, it is in fact just checkmate. If king takes g4, then the very simple h3 is checkmate, a very beautiful one. And if the king instead comes back to g6, now granted white is down a ton of material, but it simply doesn't matter because these 4 pieces that I am highlighting here are all you need to checkmate the king. Check this out. You have rook to e5 check, the king comes to f7, rook to e7 check, king to g8. Here there are many checkmating patterns. You can begin with rook to g7, but the simplest is knight h6, and the cherry on the top is mate with rook to h7 check. So as a quick recap, here is the best game of the year. It began with a highly intuitive and strategic decision to give away a piece, sacrificing the bishop here, but in return getting huge compensation in the form of the pawn mass in the center, in the form of the pieces that are accumulating around this king, and the fact that the king can never reach safety. Now the game continued with f4 launching and bringing the final piece into the game, and it ended with an incredibly beautiful and incredibly tactical sacrifice, rook to g7, which leads to a forced checkmating sequence, which you can see right here with a queen sacrifice to absolutely take it to the next level. A stunning game by Duda. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you are new around here, like this video if you learned something new from it, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.